Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now, in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller with you. We have a return guest, and so appropriate to have Professor Richard Painter. And Professor Painter is not only a professor at the University Law School, the University of Minnesota, but he was also the chief ethics officer in the Bush administration, George W. Bush administration. And ethics is something I think that is so primary a topic for us to talk about. So let's start with William Barr. What do you think about William Barr and the recent revelations in terms of his suppression of the Mueller report and his distortion of it? And should that be the subject of either prosecution or discipline?
Well, the running of the Justice Department under William Barr is a matter that should be investigated thoroughly by the Department of Justice and by Congress. I spent most of last summer working on a 200-plus page report on the Justice Department under William Barr that was issued by the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania and Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW. And that is now posted on the University of Pennsylvania webpage there. We went through everything that Bill Barr had been doing as Attorney General, from his suppression of the Mueller report, his distortion of the Mueller report when he communicated with Congress about the Mueller investigation, his attempts to interfere in criminal prosecutions with Roger Stone and Michael Flynn and others. William Barr essentially ran the Justice Department as an arm of the Trump re-election campaign in violation of the Hatch Act, in violation of Justice Department policy. And he may very well have lied to Congress. We now have a federal judge who is very upset with the way William Barr handled the Mueller investigation and other matters, and this absolutely needs to be investigated. That's what we concluded in our report on the Justice Department. We had a bipartisan group of people looking at this matter, including former Republican Justice Department officials, and there's uniform shock in our group, our working group looking at the Justice Department at the way William Barr had handled his job.
Well, Judge Berman, in her decision, her 41-page decision, absolutely castigated him and really was very outspoken to reinforce what you just said. So let's hope that down the road, something does come to pass, because what he did should not go unpunished. And speaking of unpunished, it was disclosed yesterday that Rudy Giuliani is apparently under investigation by the Bar Association in New York for his conduct. And perhaps you want to add something to his conduct.
Well, we don't know everything about what Rudy Giuliani was up to, but he was representing Donald Trump with the Trump campaign in dealings in Ukraine, and that is what Donald Trump was impeached for. We recall that in 2019, just as the Mueller investigation was closing up, President Trump told the president of Ukraine, "You need to start investigating Joe Biden and his son Hunter." And that's basically the quid pro quo for that military aid, hundreds of millions of dollars of military aid that Ukraine needed to keep the Russians away. And that was, I believe, a solicitation of a bribe from Ukraine, solicitation of assistance with the reelection campaign of the president in return for the military aid. Donald Trump should have been convicted for that, should have been removed from office in his first impeachment trial, but we never had a trial. Mitch McConnell wouldn't let it happen. Rudy Giuliani was in there, front and center, as the lawyer who Donald Trump told the Ukrainian president that they ought to get in touch with, along with William Barr, the Attorney General, who was also in on it. And by the way, the Secretary of State, because the State Department people were involved.
Let's not leave out Rod Rosenberg, also, who was also in it, seemed innocent at the time, but he seems now to certainly have been one of the perpetrators.
We've got a lot of guilty people running around, and this whole matter needs to be investigated because this was an attempt, and not the first attempt, to get a foreign government to interfere in an American election. But here, hundreds of millions of dollars of military aid was promised the Ukrainian government in return for that. We cannot run a well-functioning democracy if we're going to have candidates or presidents or candidates go out and solicit aid from foreign governments. And that includes starting bogus investigations of their political opponents or Russia hacking Hillary Clinton's email, which is what happened in 2016. Our democracy is not going to last if that's the route we go.
And you were the chief of ethics, really, in a Republican administration. And I know that your president has spoken out about some of this also, as well. And when I say your president, I mean George W. Bush, while you were working in that administration. So this has a real bipartisan tinge to it, I would say.
Well, yes, it does. We have Republicans across the board and former Republicans who are dismayed and, quite frankly, scared at the direction of the Republican Party under Donald Trump. And we have Lynn Cheney, the daughter of the vice president, who is about to be ostracized from the political party because she stood up to Donald Trump. Now, this happened before Donald Trump, this trend. We all know about it here in Minnesota when Arnie Carlson, a former Republican governor, was ostracized by the Republican Party for not adhering to the extreme right-wing views on social issues. So we can't blame all of this on Donald Trump. There's been this gravitation toward the extreme right in the Republican Party for quite some time. But Donald Trump has put a new twist on it. And that is the extreme rhetoric of xenophobia, nationalism, the attacks on his political opponents that rise to a level of viciousness we never saw in the Bush and Obama years, and the adherence to false information, the use of false information, alternative facts, as Kellyanne Conway said, in order to win elections. And it is shocking to me that we have a significant number of people who say they were Republican voters who don't believe the basic fact that Joe Biden did win the election in November of 2020, regardless of who you voted for. That's a fact. And if people can't recognize objective truth and fact and want to operate on the basis of false information, we're never going to be able to have a well functioning democracy. We can disagree about how to solve problems, we can disagree about a lot, but if there's just a clear fact out there, Joe Biden won the election. And whether you voted for him or not, he won the election. That's a fact. There's such a thing as objective truth.
And he won it by 7 million votes. Not certainly a piddling amount of votes. Not where we had to have a recount or anything, although we have some really absurd things happening in states like Arizona at the moment. But you mentioned Cheney, and it really disturbs me. And philosophically, there's not a lot that I would agree with her with. But she is being castigated and name called because she told the truth or tells the truth. And it's frightening to me that a major political party will go along with that. And it's inspired, I think, by Trump. Trump is a man who has never told the truth. He's, to me, an amoral and immoral individual. And the only thing that I see him doing is being so destructive with the help of people like Fox News and Tucker Carlson and that ilk. And they also bear some responsibility for the chaos that's going on in this country right now, to say nothing of January 6th.
Absolutely right. The extremists have taken over, and the Republican Party may not last unless they can do a very, very quick turnaround and focus once again on mainstream conservative politics as opposed to the neo-fascism of the crowd that showed up on January 6th to start an insurrection at the Capitol building. And it's unfortunate. We have it right here in Minnesota with our My Pillow man who wants to run for governor, who has been spreading these rumors about a stolen election and has been sued by the Dominion Voting Machine Company over that. We have Republican parties all over the country, state parties that are kowtowing to this lie about what happened in the election of 2020 rather than focusing on what their policies ought to be for the elections in 2022 and 2024. And the American people are going to have to decide whether to support this or not. There are quite a few people who are talking about a new political party to replace the Republicans, and or more candidates simply running as independents.
And it may come to pass because there are people like yourself and many others who have been Republicans and remain Republicans in name only, not rhinos, but really true Republicans. I grew up in New York under people like John Lindsay and Jacob Javits, and those were people who had a different party affiliation, but you could talk to and you could reason with and you could deal with, as opposed to this inflexible Republican mantra that we are getting now.
Well, this is absolutely right. And it's just gotten worse under Donald Trump. But I reiterate, we had this before, and I've spoken with Arnie Carlson about his treatment by the Republican Party here in Minnesota after he refused to go along with them on all the issues. And the fact of the matter is, the Republican Party doesn't want to have a big tent. They don't want to include people who are libertarian on the social issues. They don't want to include people who might want to have some regulation of guns. That doesn't mean you take away everybody's gun, but some rules with respect to gun use and ownership, and go on down the line on the issues. The movement to the far right in the Republican Party is very, very concerning. And then you add on top of that the incendiary and racist rhetoric of Donald Trump, and then the alternative facts about the election and quite a few other things. And it's a very, very bad mix.
Well, I think Donald Trump is actually unhinged, in addition to being a really pathological liar. But you mentioned guns there, and there is so much distortion about the Second Amendment. I feel very secure with my musket and cannonballs in my closet. And it seems to me that that's what the founding fathers were talking about. They weren't talking about these magazines that hold 100 shells, 100 bullets in them to go deer hunting. I mean, there is only one reason that you have a gun like that, and that's to kill or wage war, not for what was originally intended. And, you know, we do have to change with the times. You can be an originalist, but you do have to have some touch with reality as to the times we live in. And we see what's going on with the killings that are just rampant running through cities.
It's a tragedy. It's particularly bad this year now that we've had pullback in policing operations in quite a few places. That the guns, it's out of control. That doesn't mean take away everyone's gun, but you need to have some rules with respect to gun ownership and where you can take a gun. I mean, the founders talked about a well-organized militia. And what we have going on in some of our urban areas, that's not a well organized militia. And neither is a bunch of people running around in northern Michigan in camouflage on the weekends with AR 15s, waiting and training for the next insurrection like January 6th. This is a situation that needs some regulation of firearms, and it's all about law and order. And the Republican Party traditionally was a party of law and order, but if you don't regulate firearms at all, how can you have any law and order? It makes absolutely no sense.
And states like Texas now have made it possible for anybody to carry without any licensing or any reference at all, and just to walk around with a weapon. It absolutely is insanity in my mind.
Well, it is. And what we've also seen now is that while under the law, uh, we have quite liberal rules on guns and gun ownership. And we also do in Minnesota that there are different implications for different groups of people. An African American who has a gun permit and tells the police officer he has a gun permit when he's pulled over may get shot. That's what happened to Philando Castile. And Philando Castile was pulled over there in Falcon Heights and told the police officer, I got a gun permit, exercising his Second Amendment rights while black. He gets blown away. And by the way, the Falcon Heights City Council, I have documentation that they knew about racial profiling by the police before that happened and didn't do anything, acknowledged it on the record. So the point is that this so-called Second Amendment right is only for some people as a practical matter. And those who carry guns caught driving while black in Falcon Heights, at least, well, we saw what happened there.
And, you know, moving on to something else, and we could spend really the whole time talking about Second Amendment and or what we've spoken about so far. But let's talk about freedom of speech and Facebook and Donald Trump, Twitter and Donald Trump. They have removed him. And we really have to tread a very careful line here between holding back on freedom of speech. Where do you sit on that, and how do you see that?
Well, Twitter and Facebook are private companies, and we can argue about whether they have a monopoly they shouldn't have, and whether we ought to break up social media companies. Google's another one. And that's a conversation we need to have with respect to the media in general, and in particular social media. But the answer is not to step in and say, okay, Twitter and Facebook are going to be treated like a governmental entity, and I have to adhere to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. We don't do that for any other private organizations. Indeed, you have the right, with a private company, you running your platform, to say if we do not want to have insurrectionists on our platform or racist language, you have the right to exclude people. Certainly, if you do so reasonably and based on the same standards apply to everybody. So I think that Facebook and Twitter have acted within their rights. We should keep in mind that Donald Trump used, in particular, Twitter in order to gain the presidency. It's a very powerful platform. And the constant tweets and attacks on everybody, lies about Hillary Clinton. It went nonstop, and Twitter put up with it in 2016. But after the storming of the Capitol in a riot that was incited by Donald Trump, Twitter finally realized the enormous potential damage that could be done to a representative democracy with that type of a platform in the hands of someone like Donald Trump, and they took him off. And I'd support that decision. And then we ought to separately talk about whether these large conglomerates in social media and big tech ought to have the market power they do.
Now, you just mentioned the riot of January 6th. I think of January 6th as an act of insurrection. I think that those were insurrectionists. I think that they were trying to overthrow not only the vote, but the government of the United States. And I think that they should be prosecuted, even though I know it's difficult, as insurrectionists and not rioters, although Marjorie Taylor Greene just called them rioters. I think it goes far beyond riot. I think when they arrive with weapons and a plan and threat to really kill members of Congress, the vice president, etc., that they are really fostering an insurrection.
Well, yes, that's how an insurrection usually takes place. You have a group of people go to the capital of whatever country they want to have an insurrection in and invade the capital, and then hope that the military is going to side with them. And that's how coups usually take place. You start with a group of people who say they're having a protest or whatever it is, and they get inside the gates, and then the question is, who's the military going to side with? And we were in a situation where it could have been a heck of a lot worse if Donald Trump that day had ordered the United States military over there to invade the Capitol and side with their insurrectionists, which is a grave danger to have someone like Donald Trump as the commander in chief. Fortunately, that did not happen. I don't believe the military in the United States would have followed such orders. But what I want to emphasize is the conduct you saw on January 6th in the United States Capitol building is typical of the first stage of an insurrection or coup in many countries that have gone that way, with the insurrectionists hoping that they're then going to get backup support from the military and actually take over the government. And that's what these people wanted. They were in there with weapons. They were threatening to hang the vice president of the United States. They went into the speaker's office. This was clearly an insurrection. It was an insurrection incited by Donald Trump. I wrote an op-ed over the summer about that for the Just Security blog post with Professor Claire Finkelstein at the University of Pennsylvania. We went through the insurrection statutes and sedition statutes that were violated not only by the insurrectionists, but by the man who incited them to go there, Donald Trump.
And we wonder if he'll ever be prosecuted for it. But one thing that happened today is that Derek Chauvin and the other 3 police officers who were involved in the killing of George Floyd have now been indicted by a federal grand jury on civil rights charges. Where do you see that going? And how do you explain the civil rights charges?
Well, the civil rights charge, they clearly were violating George Floyd's civil rights at the time when he was being apprehended, and excessive force was used. And then the other officers assisted in that and also did not render medical aid. So there is a strong case of civil rights violation. It's a powerful case, of course, resulting in the death of the victim. What I am most intrigued by, though, is the fact that the Department of Justice charged Derek Chauvin in connection with a 2017 incident in which he beat the daylights out of a young boy, a 14-year-old boy, simply for not following his commands in the boy's own home in front of his mother. Derek Chauvin somehow was let off the hook on that and was allowed to serve as a police officer for the city of Minneapolis. And now the federal Department of Justice has charged that as a crime. Now, the question that brings to bear is why wasn't this addressed when it happened? What happened in the Minneapolis Police Department? How about the city council of Minneapolis and the other political powers that be? What did they know about police misconduct in Minneapolis? Was it similar to Falcon Heights, where I have on the record the fact that a city council member in 2016 admits to knowing about racial profiling by the police before Philando Castillo was murdered? And yet she said on the record in 2016 she didn't do anything about it. What happened in Minneapolis? How could Derek Chauvin have done that to a young 14-year-old boy, sent him to the hospital for stitches, beat him up in his own home, and still be a police officer? And if they had addressed this in Minneapolis, if the city council had been watching the police department and reports of abuse, they would have found that incident and made sure that guy was booted off the police force and George Floyd would be alive today. So I do want to hold the politicians in this state accountable, not just the police officers. I want to see them tried too, but I want to hold the police officers accountable. I want to know about the city councils in Brooklyn Center and Minneapolis. And I want to review, and I've asked for a review of what happened in Falcon Heights and St. Anthony in 2016.
It's a shame for the 800 to 900,000 police officers throughout the country who are good, dedicated police officers who spend their 20 years or so, many of whom never even pull their weapon. I think probably at least 25% never even pull their weapon. And these people really take an oath and believe in the oath. And then you get some, and it's been rampant, no question, in Minneapolis, that abuse the oath and abuse the privilege of people, and particularly people of minorities. And those people have to be weeded out and prosecuted and made sure that not only do they not carry weapons, that they are not peace officers anyplace.
Well, absolutely right. The vast majority of police officers are not our loyal public servants, but are brave and compassionate individuals who put their lives on the line for us every day. And they're the ones who pay the price for the fact that the police departments and the city council supervising the police departments are not willing to crack down and get the bad apples out of the cart. And in any organization, whether it's the United States military or the police, or in a university where I'm teaching, in public schools, you're going to have some people who don't belong there. We want to get the pedophiles out of the schools. That doesn't mean that 98% of the teachers out there aren't good teachers and very good teachers. We ought to stand by. The same with the police officers.
So much more for us to talk about. And it's always a privilege to talk to you, Professor Painter. And I have a long list of things that we didn't cover that I wanted to cover today. So obviously we're going to have you back in a few months. But I really appreciate the fact that you take the time and share your expertise with us. We've been talking with Professor Richard Painter of the University of Minnesota Law School. And again, thank you for being with us. And we'll see you hopefully shortly.
Thank you so much, Alan.